Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're going to be looking at three new figures from Stan Solo, and they are retro versions of EV-9d9. We have Barada in the middle and we have Han Solo in his Carbonite block. Now these are all versions of Last 17 figures, and as with all Stan Solo products, they are made to a really high quality. So let's take a look at each one of them individually and I'll compare them to the originals from my collection. We're going to start with EV-9d9, which is probably one of the hardest Last 17 figures to get, because more often than not you'll find them like this with the arms missing. This is a very common problem with EV-9d9s. In fact, my original one here, this is my vintage 17 original, actually has two right arms because I've never been able to find the correct arm to go on it. Both of these arms are damaged, so they sort of are removable. So this is the closest I ever got to having an original one. So the Stan Solo version here, as you can see, is a very nice recreation of that figure. It's in a slightly more sort of matte plastic, I would say, but it may be that this one has been played with a lot, my vintage one, so it's got a little bit shiny over the years. But the overall effect is it's really very nice. It's so close to the original, it's actually quite hard to tell. And the nice little feature with EV-9d9, on the original one, you can see we have this little mouth that you can move. You just have to push this little lever on the back of the head and a little mouth opens up. And Stan Solo have managed to do exactly the same thing on this one, so you can see we can open the mouth up and down. I think that's really nice because that's quite a sort of unique little feature, and obviously made for quite a sort of thing to recreate. You sort of getting the tooling right to recreate that little feature, but it does work. We can still pose the arms. She's not a particularly poseable character just because of the way it's constructed. You've got these sort of big lumps on the front, so the legs don't actually rotate particularly far forwards, and because it's such a spindly figure, it does tend to suffer with bowed legs. Again, that's something I've actually shown a video for sort of a long while ago, is how to unbow the legs of them, but all of the vintage versions of EV-9d9 tend to have these sort of bowed legs. But yeah, I just think it's a very nice recreation of that figure, and certainly, as I say, one of the harder ones to get. So I think if you want to get one in your collection, the Stan Solo one is a really good opportunity to get a very nice recreation of that figure. Next up we have Barada, which is one of those figures, I have to say, I don't actually have that much of a connection to the vintage one. It was one of the last ones I actually got in my collection, and I don't ever remember having one as a child or seeing one as a child. So when I finally got this for my sort of vintage collection, it really did nothing for me. But I do like the fact that Stan Solo have made a version of him, because he is a fairly awkward figure to come across. So you can see here, he looks a bit like a sort of a walrusy sort of lizardy type pirate. This figure is actually a second. I'm going to say that to you now. I picked this one up off eBay because Chris didn't have any in stock. So this is one that he had sort of sold on to someone else as not being completely perfect. And when it arrived, I was looking at it thinking, well, what is actually wrong with this? Why was this a second? And it turns out that there's a slight stress mark in the chest there. So I'm just going to point that out. On the ones you get direct from Stan Solo, you won't get that. It will be an absolutely perfect figure. But as I say, this is a second, so one that's not quite perfect. But really, it is a very nice figure indeed. You can see it is a very good recreation of Barada. If I hold up my original one here, you can see it does match incredibly closely. If I was being picky, I would say that the yellow is possibly slightly lighter than this one here, but otherwise really it's incredibly close on the colour match. The sculpting on this one, on the moulding, is a little bit soft as well. It's not quite as sort of defined as the vintage one, but really that is me being particularly picky on this. Otherwise everything else looks exactly the same. I didn't point out on the EV-9d9, but the copyright information on the back has been replaced. So you can see there it says SS. On the original ones it has Lucasfilm Limited, and this one comes with the sort of correct staff or stick that Barada should have. As you can see, it does look like a very nice figure indeed. But for me, this is probably one of my least favourite of the Last 17 figures, just because I don't remember having it as a child, and I don't remember sort of even him being that much in the movie. But you know, if you're going to collect Star Wars figures, you've got to have them all, and certainly I had to get this one, even though I didn't really remember what he was like. But there you go, that is Barada from Stan Solo. And finally, in this review of three figures, we have Han Solo. So you can see this is Han Solo in his Carbonite block version. So it comes with this rather nice Carbonite block, and you can quite handily stick Han inside there and just about see him through the sort of clear plastic. Now this figure always sort of bugs me because it just looks a little bit odd. And I have to say this version is a very good recreation of the original, so I'm not saying that the Stan Solo version isn't very good. I just think the original one was a little bit odd. He's got a very thick neck and very thin arms and sort of a very wide chest, but that is exactly how the original one looked. If I bring in my original Han Solo, you can see here it's the exact same proportion, so a very thick neck and sort of wide body with quite thin arms. I don't know quite why they did that. As you can see, the Stan Solo one copies all of the details really very closely. Again, on the back we can look that it says SS there just on his leg. Again, if I was being overly picky, I would say this one is a little bit darker on this top sort of area. His shirt is just a little bit slightly darker grey, but it really is a very subtle difference. I think my original one here may be slightly yellowed, so it could be that that's sort of making it look a bit of a different colour. But the overall effect is this is a really very nice figure, and you can see he's even managed to get the sort of tiny little eyes printed on there, which I think is an amazing achievement to do. I've tried repainting eyes like that and I can't do it, so I've no idea how they managed to get those so small. And then we come on to the Carbonite block. So this is the Stan Solo version of the Carbonite block. This doesn't have any extra sort of copyright information on it. It's just a fairly sort of plain block with minimal details on the side and Han Solo sort of silhouette there on the front. And if you look at my original, you can see it is a very accurate copy of it. My original version of the block here, you can see it's actually been quite well played with, so there's all sorts of marks and scratches and dings on it. So it's nice to actually see one as it sort of would have been back in the day without any marks on it at all. It's almost absolutely sort of pristinely clean, so it's very nice to see that. So this is quite a unique character from the sort of Star Wars line, because it's the only one that comes with such a large accessory like this. But it's quite a nice accessory to have because it gives you options of how you display the figure. You can either display him in the block like that, because you can see he clips in quite nicely, or you can have the two displayed side by side, which I have to say is how I tend to have it, because it's nice to have his block sort of leaning up behind Jabba. So I have that bit of Jabba and Han standing nearby. But as you can see again with all of these Stan Solo figures, this is a very good sort of recreation of the last 17 Han Solo and Carbonite figure. I will be putting a link to Stan Solo's Etsy page in the description for this video, so if you want to get these for yourself, then do check that out. And also check out some of my other reviews of the Stan Solo collection, because he's been producing a lot of figures over the last few years, not just recreations of the vintage Star Wars figures, but custom ones as well. And I've reviewed a few of his custom figures recently, and I know he has more in the pipeline, so as soon as those are available I will be getting them, and I will also review those on this channel. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And finally, for this group of 3 review that I'm doing here, we have Stan Solo, and this is the Carbonite block version of Stan Solo.